Hello, and welcome to What's Your Story? I'm Judy Mario, your host, and I'm so delighted you're here with us. And you're going to be delighted too because we have a great guest today. Her name is Danielle Sebastian, and she's an expert on overcoming relationship trauma. And I'm pretty excited to hear about that because I've had a bit of relationship trauma in my life, as many of you have. She is also a best selling author, and the book is entitled Resilient Wives, a guide for women supporting. Um, I'm sorry, I've screwed up her book title. Let me straighten that out for you. Let me just look here and make sure I've got it right. Okay, her book is entitled Resilient Wives, a guide for women supporting their husbands through childhood trauma recovery. That's a mouthful, but it's a great book. And she's helped literally thousands of women to navigate and repair their relationships and to support their husbands through the trauma of childhood abuse. And so let's welcome Danielle Sebastian. Hi, Danielle.
Hello, thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here today.
Thank you. I'm really glad to have you here. Um, what is the impact of trauma in adult relationships?
Well, it is really a profound thing that I think that a lot of people don't understand how a history of childhood trauma can impact adult relationships. It's not talked about a lot. There aren't a lot of resources out there for spouses of someone who experienced childhood trauma. And what I ended up finding out the hard way is that a lot of the coping mechanisms that children develop having a traumatic childhood were coping mechanisms when they needed to survive their childhood and survive their environment. And a lot of those coping mechanisms, like keeping people at arm's length, needing to control their environment and how close people get, can be very detrimental in adult relationships.
Amazing. How does a couple really start to know if the pain that they're having and the problems in their relationships are actually unresolved trauma? How do they recognize that?
Yeah, that's very interesting because there were a lot of signs that I missed in my relationship. So my husband and I were married 14 years ago. And after our son was born, I started to identify and notice these behaviors that just didn't make sense. Things like I just alluded to, where just when we would seem to get close, we he would end up pushing me very far away. He had needed to control a lot about the environment and the way that our relationship was. And then I started to notice a lot of lashing out where it seemed like normal things that a wife would ask a husband. So, for example, hey, can you help with the dishes tonight? Seemed to be taken by my husband as a personal affront to his character, to who he was as a person and a father and a husband. And it was just something that we couldn't get over. It just seemed like I was constantly walking on eggshells. So those are some of the signs that could be happening in a relationship that might be stemming from a history of childhood abuse. And it was only when I had basically had enough. We tried everything. We've tried the counselors. We tried love languages. We tried date nights. We tried using I statements, that my husband was finally able to reveal to me for the first time to anyone a terrible history of childhood abuse at the hands of the church.
Wow.
He'd never told anyone.
And
Yeah.
when we start to identify those signs, is there still hope? Is there, can you look at that and say, maybe we can make this better?
Yeah. So knowing that could be an underlying cause, there are absolutely different tools that I've learned that you can use to create new patterns in your relationship. Those coping mechanisms, the average age that men disclose child, especially sexual abuse, is 52 years of age.
Oh my goodness.
So it's a long time for them to use those coping mechanisms and have them change, but they can change. And you as a spouse, there's several tools you can use when you're seeing those behaviors that will really make things better rather than making them worse.
So I'm hearing you say that when you're in a relationship with someone who's been through this childhood trauma, it is salvageable. There are certain things you can do.
Yes, it is salvageable. And both partners need to be, on the same page, want the same things, but absolutely with patience and diligence and making baby steps, you end up getting huge dividends in your relationship.
How do you break through this? How do you break through and then go forward? I mean, if someone is in that situation like your husband where he's lashing out at you, he's probably basically saying, "I don't want to talk about it." And so, how do you get him to talk about it? How do you get him to, sit down with you and make those breakthroughs?
The number one thing I recommend is doing some trauma research, starting to identify the triggers that are out there and which ones are triggering your particular partner. Once you can identify the triggers, because they're tricky, they can be really tricky, and there can be a lot of blame placed on a spouse just because of how close you are, that they're seeing danger even when it's not there. But when you can identify it and then be able to communicate with your partner, I don't think this is about me, or I don't think this is really about the dishes. I
Mm.
think that it might be that, this is making you, triggering you in a feeling that you had as a kid, when you were being blamed for things that you didn't do. And when you can have those conversations together and really put the anger where it belongs, which is what happened to them, you can make real progress.
Mhm, mhm. So you're saying that this trauma, maybe it's not sexual abuse. There are other kinds of trauma in childhood, right?
Oh yes, there I have quite a few clients where their husbands just had traumatic past, abandonment, alcoholic parents that just weren't there, physical and sexual and emotional abuse. Abuse, it's different for everyone, but if you are noticing that these behaviors are occurring over and over again, then it's likely that some of those trauma responses could be causing what's going on.
Mm, mm. So, how can you and your partner get back on the same page? How can you create a healthier pattern?
The Again, understanding the triggers is the number one step, and then I have some communication scripts that would help stop that pattern, because what seems to happen is that the same fights keep happening again and again, and until something can come in and change that dynamic between the two of you, it just seems like things keep spiraling out of control. So what I just said is very important, like trying to figure out really what's going on and what's causing those emotions and those triggers and hitting them head on. The other thing is that there's a lot of pressure on a spouse in these situations, in most cases, to keep things a secret. It's not really, you don't feel it's your story to tell. And so there's a lot of isolation with the spouse trying to be everything, including a counselor to their partner. And that's one of the things that I had to learn the hard way, was that I couldn't do it alone. I did need support. I needed a safe place where I could share what was going on and deal with my emotions that were coming out of it. So those two things are where I recommend that people start.
Wow. I wish I'd have met you years ago when I was going through my divorce
I
because
do too.
as I hear you saying these things, I actually hear kinds of things that were happening in my life with my partner. My husband was he would lash out at me, like you say, over amazing things, but it usually was a direct attack on me, like, you're not going to wear your hair that way, are you? Or we'd go out the door to go to someplace to eat, and we'd get halfway there, and he'd go, are you going to wear what you've got on? Well, what other choice do I have? We're halfway there, you know? And there were things and that I just didn't understand. And I used to beg him to go to counseling, and he wouldn't do that. How do you get someone to go into counseling?
That is the number one question that I get. And, of course, you can't make anybody go in there. They have to be willing partners. Usually they have to be willing partners to want to do that and actually get some benefit out of it. But what I have really found is that if spouses can identify those triggers, put the anger where it belongs, and not on you,
Not
and there's
take
a
it
lot of
personally.
blame that goes with this. And if you can stop feeling responsible for those behaviors and then have a conversation and put the anger where it belongs, then it seems that the part becomes a lot more open to getting help and dealing with those underlying issues.
Can this work for husbands as well?
It can. It can. I have focused on women partners, but I have some male husbands of wives who have had childhood trauma who the tools really are the same.
Yeah, we usually think when we think of, or I do, let's put it this way, I usually think when people are having these relationship problems that it's the woman that is feeling too sensitive, too hurt, too ignored. And so we kind of blame her for being kind of bitchy because she's upset and they're just out trying to make a living. But this issue goes both ways, doesn't it?
It does. And the one of the hardest things, especially it seems for women, is to separate themselves from the trauma responses. So I do a lot of work on that because intuitively we want to go in and fix it. We want to take the blame if it will make it go away. And actually those things are making it worse.
I know I used to do all the wrong things whenever I would get told I didn't even know how to wash the dishes correctly. I would then attack his mother. I would say, well, your mother didn't do this either. And so I think one of the things I'm hearing you say is we have to learn not to attack or not to be defensive or not to take it personally. Is that right?
Yes, do not take it personally, especially as you start to identify these triggers, and they're everywhere, unfortunately, for these poor people that had a traumatic childhood. I mean, the triggers are everywhere, which is really just, I mean, if you think about it, really sad that they see the danger absolutely everywhere. And imagining being in their shoes really makes me sad. But once you can do that and not take, I have to say, in many cases, a very large proportion of the fights that you have nothing to do with you.
Hmm. Hmm. So if I have a problem with my husband, which I don't have one now because I already didn't know how to deal with it, so how will going and getting help for myself, how will that help the situation?
It really does stem from you not feeling all this blame and shame. It's very freeing to realize that a lot of these things are not your fault. It is not about you. So that is the first step that I work with wives on, and then we start figuring out, okay, knowing that, how can we communicate better? We literally script out the common situations that occur so that you can have a really good conversation where you're not putting your partner on the defensive, knowing that some of those things will cause triggers in them.
Mhm.
So it's really about being able to communicate better and have real conversations in order to see change.
Now, in your counseling with people, you working with the wife, do you have them ever come in together? Do you ever work with both of them?
I do not. My program is all about the spouse. And I also work very hard on, these women are often just burned out. They don't even remember who they are anymore, what they love, what they want in life. And so a large part of my program is like, hey, you deserve to have fun again, you know, to get some joy back, to take care of yourself. You don't have to be in survival mode. In fact, being in survival mode makes even though you want these great responses, if you're exhausted and burned out, you're going to be more reactive to the triggers than you want to be. So my program is all about the spouse, and hopefully the relationship component comes with it.
And the longer we stay in that relationship and don't get help, the worse it becomes. Is that right?
I have absolutely seen that what used to happen, you know, where you would have the fight over that, it used to be once a month. Pretty soon it's every 2 weeks, and then it's every 2 days. And the fights get longer and the repair process takes longer. So I have seen a cycle where things just continue to get worse until something just has to come in and change.
So the sooner we identify what's going on, the sooner we can get help and make it better.
Yes, the sooner that again, these coping mechanisms are really, they've been ingrained so far, but if you're in a relationship where you're just starting to see these patterns, that's a great time to come in and just say, hey, we're not going to be doing it this way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. When I when I was in that situation, yeah, boy, I mean, you've opened up something inside of me this morning because
Mm.
um, when I was in that situation, I didn't see any way out of it except for the divorce. I didn't go for a divorce for 21 years. I stayed in the marriage for the 21 years and didn't go for the divorce. And then when I did, I couldn't even I couldn't even take care of myself. I couldn't go to the attorney by myself. I didn't have the nerve to stay and insist on staying in my own home. So I had to get someone take me to rent an apartment, to get a telephone. I couldn't do any of that. Yet I was totally an entrepreneur running a major business, and yet in my personal life, I couldn't function. How does that happen that our personalities just split like that? And over here, I'm fine. But in this relationship with this man who everybody would see us together and they would say, oh, he's such a wonderful husband because he was always smiling and holding my hand in public and being sweet, but at home he wasn't so nice. And so they would say, you know, you've just got such a wonderful husband. Why are you divorcing him? And what do you say?
Yeah, it's so interesting because the majority of my clients are very successful career women and very successful. So people don't think that they're that's part of the isolation, right? Is that people are like, how could they, have this relationship that is so toxic? So part of it is that the complex trauma is complex and it has complex consequences to everyone around them. It really does. So that is part of it. I do think that another little part of it is that because we've been so successful, we are like, why can't we figure this out?
Mm-hmm,
Right?
mm-hmm.
Why can't we figure this out? And so you stay in that position longer than I think is necessary. And then there is a lack of resources. So I really, through trial and error, developed the program that I have today and extensive research in the small amount that there is out there for spouses. I put it all together. And that wasn't there for me. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today.
Well, it's amazing. I'm still going to go get the book, even though I've been divorced longer than I was married. I'm gonna I'm gonna go get the book and read it because as I'm listening to you, I'm starting to understand some of the things that were happening in that relationship. And I was young then, so I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know who to talk to. And so sometimes that's the difficulty. So if the people at home that are hearing this are identifying like I am with you, how do they get in touch with you? How do they find out about you and where you are and how to talk to you about this?
Yeah, I would love for them to reach out. My website is the best place to just see more about what I offer, what I've found. I have free resources on there for anyone and more about my program. So that's great. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. So feel free to message me there, and I offer a free coaching call for anyone, for everyone who is thinking about, oh my gosh, this is really resonating with me and I want to learn more. I offer a free coaching call, and that is on my website.
And your book, tell us again the name of your book, and I apologize.
Was a mouthful. Yep.
I screwed it up so bad when I said it in the
Oh,
introduction.
no. It was hard to put concisely, but so it's Resilient Wives, a guide for wives who are supporting their husbands through childhood trauma recovery.
Okay, is it available on Amazon?
Amazon. Yes, right on
Oh,
Amazon.
okay, so we can
And
go
you
to.
could just put my name in, and the book usually comes up.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, so we'll go to Amazon. We'll put in your name, Danielle Sebastian,
Yep,
and we'll find the book, and we'll all buy it and read it, and we'll maybe heal some of the things that are going on inside of us as well as our relationships.
absolutely. Absolutely. Trauma impacts everyone and in different ways, and more ways than I could have even imagined when I started this journey.
Well, I am so happy that you've been our guest today. You've been absolutely wonderful. You've opened up a whole bunch of questions for me. So I'm sure we're going to have you back one day, and then I'm going to pick your brain some more. Actually, I'm not going to pick your brain. I'm just going to ask you questions.
That
But,
sounds great.
but it'd be nice to have you back again. Thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for being here with us today. I know you probably have a lot of questions, the same as I do. This was a really insightful interview, and well, as you heard, I'm just kind of like blown away that I didn't recognize the signs, and so I think those of us who are having problems, we better get that book, we better read it, and you can get a hold of Danielle Sebastian on Facebook or Instagram. And so if you need help, reach out to her, okay? And thank you for being here, and we'll see you again very soon.